Welcome in the name of Rotary Stuttgart-International. For some of you who don't know Rotary, Rotary is a service club. All in all, it's about taking responsibility for a better world. There are about 1.2 million Rotarians worldwide who come together weekly and engage in a positive, lasting change in our communities and around the world. Our different occupations, cultures, and countries give us a unique perspective. Our shared passion for service helps us accomplish the remarkable. We serve through global and local projects. Also, non-Rotarians may have heard about the effort to end polio and the massive donations by Rotarians backed up by the Gates Foundation. This club, the Rotary Club Stuttgart-International, just collected 212 bicycles, used bikes, for school kids in South African townships. But we also serve Stuttgart in supporting, for example, the homeless people in Stuttgart, or the John Granko School, Sister Margaret's Breakfast Kitchen, and many other projects. In essence, Rotary and Rotarians accept responsibility for improving the world in small and impressively big projects. My name is Klaus Schuler. I'm happy to serve our club Stuttgart International as the president for the year 2015 and 16. Today we meet at the starting point of a series of impulses for leaders. We address the series specifically to leaders in the area of Stuttgart. All of you in this room have exciting jobs and opportunities. But it's important to understand that leadership is more than a role or a job. It is an attitude. Everyone who sees an issue, a problem, and takes action to improve it is a leader by attitude. In the Impulse series of the Rotary Club Stuttgart International, you will see that business leaders have a significant impact on our living conditions. But also that it is basically three levels together: the government, the enterprises, and each of us as individuals who have big influence. Only those three levels together, some call it macro, meso, micro, so macro as kind of the government, meso level as the companies, and the micro level, the individuals. Only these three levels together in collaboration can develop the power to create a world in which we all want to live in. So what is this evening then about? This evening is the opening of this series of speeches and network opportunity, which will look at innovation, sustainability, and responsible impact of our business corporations on our society as a whole. Beyond giving back something at the end of a good year, for example, it is even more important to test our own business strategy. Is it really driven by an ethical purpose? To just get started at the right end. We need to question our products, our services, our processes, and our business models if they are prepared to improve the world and generate more sustainability. When I'm working with engineers and with technical companies, my question is always, why are you doing what you are doing? And then there's, of course, one response, which you all have in mind right now already. Well, there's about money, right? Yes, it is. But is this the last purpose of your organization? Or do you just need the money to fulfill a mission? Now to the speakers. So Global Ethic Institute was founded in 2012 based on the extensive research of Professor Küng, which many of you certainly have a memory of, all the research published in the former years. And his team, we have to say. Of course, often his name is mentioned, but there's a whole team behind the idea and the research who put this all together. So key topics in their lectures in Tübingen, but also around the world, are business ethics, case studies, ethical decision-making, and their academic director, the real, let me say, marvelous Klaus Dirksmeier, searches on freedom and responsibility, money and global ethics, global citizenship, intercultural dialogue, and conflict resolution. We have the pleasure tonight to have the managing director, Dr. Bernd Villauer, with us tonight, who will tell us about the roots of the Global Ethic Institute, as well as about what kind of insights we can expect from the Institute in the near future of the current research and all the work you are doing in there and with your team now. And then we have the Humanistic Management Center as an independent think and action tank that provides, through leadership, learning offers and knowledge application services. Dr. Ernst von Kimakowitz is managing director, and he will share his points of view on how to make business more in line with society.
The topic is valuing investment in people. I want to speak about values, not only financial values, but human values. And it will be about value investment. Not about Buffett, but other forms of value investment. Okay, who is speaking? What is the Global Ethic Institute? Just some points here. We're speaking about value. We're speaking about the notion of investment. Then there's an interesting topic, power to the people. And I'll try to put a Mark Twain quote in every speech I hold. So this is the Mark Twain quote for this one. Everybody complains about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. So what can we change, and what are the things we can't change? First, the Global Ethic Institute at the tiny but very interesting city, I assure you, of Tübingen. It was founded by Hans Küng. I think many of you know his name. Some may know his works. We are researching in the fields of business ethics, executive education, theory of economics, and intercultural studies. What is the basis theory of Küng, of Professor Hans Küng? He was trying to find a kind of overlapping consensus in the different religions, where he was asking himself, how can religions be a part of a peace process, and not being part of a confrontation and war process? He found out that there is an overlapping moral consensus. There are values and beliefs which can be found in every religion and every religious belief. So he put it together in the principle of humanity. Treat people not like animals or things, but like human beings. Reciprocity, the so-called golden rule. In Deutschland, also was du nicht willst, dass man dir tut, das füge auch keinem anderen zu. Do unto others as you would have them to unto you. And 4 important values connected with these 2 principles. That's truthfulness, justice, partnership between men and women, and peacefulness. It's not that Küng tried to say you should act like this. He's not the the preaching kind of guy. He's more an analytic mind, and he was trying to show that these things are to be found in every religion. If you go to the roots of the religion, you can find these principles, and that makes us, let's say, optimistic that based on these principles we can find connections between the religions. And the institute was founded to bring these thinking into economic problems. So if religions can contribute to the peace process, why not companies? Why not firms? And what are the values that are important for companies? So it's now about values. What are values? Values have a connection to prognosis. Based on certain core values, we can develop a better understanding of the future, of what lies ahead. A second area is values in behavior. How do values change the way we act with other people? These core values I mentioned, they lead to new forms of ethical awareness, new kind of behavior towards others. And the impact. I think speaking at Rotary, speaking about the impact is essential, because you want to have impact, you want to change something. So we think at the Global Ethic Institute that these values are to be found in the heart of every sustainable model for economy and society. So if you want to have an impact, you should speak about values. You cannot just, find a road around the values. You have to face them. Okay, what is value? Let me start with a very basic, let's say, economic definition. Actual value of a company includes the aspects of business in terms of both tangible, intangible factors. And this value is not the current market value in many situations. Well, mentioning Warren Buffett again, he made his fortune by understanding that there is a real value and a market value, and to use, this difference. But what are these tangible and intangible factors of tomorrow? What will we be valuing in the coming years? So investment is about the future. It's about knowing what path there will be, what values will be important in the coming years. And these are questions we ask ourselves in the Institute. Obviously, there are areas in which the new aspects of value investment become more and more important. That's first technology. You all know, especially in Stuttgart, especially in Baden-Württemberg, in the technology-driven industries here, this is very important, and you have to invent yourself every day anew. Second, interculturally. Third, human resources problems. And sustainability, we mentioned that. So these are all aspects we are doing research on, and we are holding lectures on, because we think that these areas will be decisive for the future of business and value-driven business, for example. So sustainability, I mentioned, is meant in 3 dimensions. It's ecological, social, and financial. Very often we found that people are speaking about ecological sustainability only, and they found it kind of dirty if you speak that if you say that a model of ecological sustainability should be financial stable as well. Oh no, don't speak about that, please. But we have to speak about that, because we can't find business models and business cases which contribute to ecological perfect situations if we don't think about the real business model, the real financial structure of the whole thing. What is investment? Purchase of goods that are not consumed today but are used in the future to create wealth. So it's about the future. If you're speaking about values, if you think about values, you're not speaking about what I'm doing right here, what I'm doing right now, but what I want to do in the future. How will I shape my own future with these values? And that is an important thing for the Global Ethic Institute. We are not the kind of preaching to the bad guys. You have to do this, or don't do this again. We are saying, what kind of ethical innovation can foster you, can bring you to the future? I think ethical innovation is much more important than just to forbid things. It's very easy to say, well, don't smoke. I mean, especially in my case, it's a strange thing to do, but you can you can say these are the wrong things and these are the good things. Please take this path. But it's much more important, especially for companies, to say, what kind of development do you wish? And is there an ethical aspect in this development, in the innovation process you're in? So we're speaking very often about ethical innovations. And you can't speak about innovation without speaking about investment problems. Because what is the possible outcome of your investment? Is there an outcome for people, planet, and profit as well? The real investment strategies, I would say, are not different roads, leading to different places, but they're interconnected path in one field. So all these values come together in a kind of a basis of values. And to see this basis helps you to create an innovative ethical model for your company. The second is a real value investment is connected with value investment in technologies and people. With smart people, without smart people, there's no smart solution. You all know in your companies that you have to help people to develop. They have to learn about the new technologies. So HR, as we say, is one of the key issues, which is also value investment. And last, value investment in profits is connected with value investment in the planet. I mentioned it, ecological sustainability is the basis of the real business cycle. Power to the people. You're asking yourself, what is that to be? So power to the people is about the HR question. How can we drive innovation by empowering people? Why is innovation an important aspect of the ethical challenge? How can we set people free? Again, free means that we need ethical innovations and not just, a sign you have to go to the right. But the interesting thing is to enable people to write these signs themselves. That is the part of the core problem of the ethical innovation. So treating human beings as human beings, I mentioned this, means that you have a picture of the future which makes you enable people to see this future. So you have the empowering process, let citizens learn more about themselves and the tasks, and you have always a change process. No empowering without change. Mark Twain. This whole concept is not to be set up without a deep notion of liberties and freedom. So again, you can think about ethics like a limitation of liberties, a limitation of freedom. Yeah, I want to do this and I want to feel free, but you're not allowed to. And you can think, this is the other model, about ethics as a kind of freeing people and to see new possibilities and to see how, it makes fun to be on the right path to sustainable solutions, for example. And to understand that better, we need to know what is changeable and what is not changeable. Well, the weather, of course, it's not, or the traffic situation around Stuttgart, I don't know whether this is changeable.
It is changeable.
It is, okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm very glad. And these are some issues we are doing research on. Technological innovations, of course, financial innovations, fintech, the Generation Y problem, empowering people, and at the same time, we are looking into the ecological limits. The cultural difference is very, very important for the concept of Hans Küng, the connection, the discussion, the dialogue, as it was mentioned, between the cultures and the nature of man. What can we do to model these things? We think that mental models, that new ways of understanding, new philosophies are very important. So we think about the philosophy behind the economy. That is one of the key issues of the Global Ethic Institute. Behind every economy there is a philosophy, a way of thinking, a way of feeling. And to understand that in a deeper way is very important. And we look at case studies. We look how did people think in the right way? Because reality proves possibility. If something worked in one place, it can work in another place. We can find a possibility, as we would say, to skalieren, to scale. And there are some things you can't change. And we think that freedom and the notion of liberty, the importance of liberty, is something you can't put out of the people, If you're a human being, you have a feeling for freedom and for your liberties. And every ethical model has to be based on these liberties. So the new freedom, or the new kind of freedom we are discovering in the Global Ethic Institute, is a qualitative freedom. Not doing more, but doing the better things, and maybe other things. And this is my sign that I'll give the speech to Mr. Erzgebachowitz. Thank you very, very much.
I'm relieved, Ben, because I don't think I have anything that is radically contradicting in contradiction to what you were saying. So that's the first good thing. Secondly, when Klaus asked me, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. When we sketched out the topic, I got really, really excited, and then Klaus told me, "All right, you'll have 20 minutes," and I went, "Okay." So either I can talk really, really, really fast, which maybe is not so good, or I had to cut down to just, as Klaus said, put a teaser up on the slides, and that's what I'll be doing. And what I wanted to look at is a bit on, driving innovation through values. What kind of innovation, and where do we need innovation? And so that we'll be doing that for the next 20 minutes. Let me switch on the timer, because that'll increase the chances that I'll only run over a little. All right, so I want to start with a few presuppositions, 3 of them actually. And the first one is that business actually does have the power to make the world a better place. That is something that has been contested for a while in the discourse. And I think there's growing consensus that this holds true, that business has the power to make the world a better place, and that we not only have a potent player in business, but that we need the active contribution of business to do that, because we're seeing that no actor alone will be able to solve the challenges we face as a global community. So neither policymakers, nor the non-profit sector, nor business will be able to address and solve the problems we're facing on their own. So the consequence is that it would be wrong on one side to expect business to single-handedly fix it. That won't be happening, but it will be equally wrong to think we can do it without the active contribution of business. So business needs to be an active part, and the way to do that, we do think that business has the power to make the world a better place, but only, this is contingent upon defining the purpose of business as a business as serving society. And that is something where we have to depart from yesteryear's song that is that the business of business is business. If you're thinking about what this actually says, it is very much a self-absorbed and a self-centered view on the business organization. What that really says is that the business of business is to serve itself. Right? And I don't think that's a very appealing proposition to society. Why should we as civil society want businesses if all they do are being self-centered organizations serving themselves? So we need to move towards a question of answering the question of the purpose of business as viewing it as organizations, entities that provide a service to society. And of course, as Bernd mentioned, profitability is part of sustainability. If I lose money year on year, I'm not sustainable, simple as that. But the mental framing or the shift that we need, I believe, is that we need to think of profits as a means to an end, and not as the end in itself, right? So we need to realign means and ends in a meaningful way, and that, in my view, is that profit is a means in order to achieve the end that is rooted in the purpose of the business organization. It's not an end in itself. And relating it now to innovation, I think in that context it becomes pretty evident that if we define or if we look at what innovation may be, meaningful innovation has got to make the world a better place. It's got to make some kind of impact, create positive externalities. If not, we'd have difficulties with the first 2 presuppositions on innovation. So based on that, I will have a very short slides, or a few slides only on each of those points. Why innovate, what innovate, and which values are conducive to generating the kind of innovation that we're looking for. And we'll have one example also of a business model that I think is pretty cool because of its simplicity. So why innovate? We need to use markets more wisely. I think that's summarizing it in one sentence, and that's what I believe is the critical point. We're not talking about questioning market economies as such. We're talking about finding smarter ways to use them. The situation we're having is that the combination of democratic government and free market economies have had a hugely liberating effect on the individual and have created unprecedented wealth in many parts of the world. So we need to embrace this. This is a fantastic success story we're looking at. The complication, however, is that at the same time we're facing a situation where on one side the natural capacity of the planet and also the inequality in wealth distribution has reached a level where we're biting the hand that feeds us. We're putting at risk the very foundation of this success story in the way we're treating the environment and in the way that we are not capable, to date at least, to find mechanisms that allow for a more equitable sharing of the fantastic progress and value creation that we have seen over the last decades. So the consequence to me is, as I said, that we are talking about the negative side effects of a big success story. But those negative side effects have become too grave to simply ignore them. And I want to highlight 4 points where I think these challenges or these side effects lie. 2 I have mentioned already. First, the environmental challenges. Has any one of you ever done a footprint calculator for themselves? No, try it out. It's fun. Okay, a few. I did it for myself. The concept is basically you fill out a little online form on your lifestyle. Some are more elaborated, some are very short. And then it tells you that if everyone in the world's population would live like you, how many planets would we need? I need around 2. Right? And I'm not that bad. I'm pretty good on most aspects of my life. I fly around far too much, so that kills it. Air travel is bad for that instance. So relating that to innovation very quickly, though, so we have 2 choices there. Either we find ways to innovate so that I can continue flying around without causing harm as much as I do now, or I stop flying around. And that, I think, is a picture, a notion that we can generally apply why innovation is needed here. Because we don't have much alternatives apart from 2. We can either substantially change our lifestyles in ways that probably very few of us want, or we will need to innovate so that we can maintain a very high level of a very high quality of life within the boundaries, the natural boundaries of our planet, and within distributional mechanisms that allow for people to live a dignified life, because we have the means for doing so. A second point, of course, is on the, so that's the environmental side. A second part then is on the social side. I mentioned it, distributional justice is becoming a huge topic. If we're looking at the wealth creation on one side that has happened over the last decades, it's stunning. At the same time, if we're looking at the way how we distributed this wealth, it's equally stunning. But the question is whether this is something that is sustainable in the sense of social unrest, peace and cohesion on a global level, but also within societies. And you've all read the data. I'm sure that 20% hold 80% of the world's wealth, and the numbers vary. But the bottom line is that we have reached a level of inequality that will lead, if we don't address it to some point, is likely to lead to some form of social unrest, to instability in societies that will harm our very capacity to continue creating wealth and to continue living lifestyles that are great in quality and that we want to maintain. Now, bringing it closer to business, there's just 2 sets of data I want to highlight. One is called the Edelman Trust Barometer. And what they're doing, they're having a whole list of professions, academics, people in NGOs. They also ask someone like you. And then they're asking if these people make a public statement, is that credible or not? Now, the 2 groups that rank lowest year on year are government leaders and CEOs. So there is a pretty serious problem in our public leadership and in business leadership in terms of trusting these. The rates are around between 30 and 60%, between 30 and 40% of people who think statements by these groups are credible. So that means 60 to 70% of a CEO says something on the evening news. 60 to 70% of the global public think it's not credible what this guy is saying. I don't trust it, no matter what he says or she says. So I think there's a trust problem that should make business leaders think whether the business models, the goals and the aims they are propagating are still suitable for what society expects today of our businesses to deliver. And the second point I want to highlight that's very close to business is the problem of employee engagement. So there's Gallup is the research organization, and they do an annual study looking at employee engagement in 3 categories. First, the engaged, then the not engaged, and the actively disengaged. And we don't need to get into the criteria who's who, but the data again is that around 70%, there's 30% only engaged, 50% are not engaged, and 20% are actively disengaged. So in the OECD countries, we lose the hearts and the engagement and the creativity and the willingness to walk the extra mile of around 70% of the workforce. that of course is very harmful for all aspects of business. It is harmful to innovating in a way that is productive and that makes our businesses more adaptable and more resilient. It is harmful for like client satisfaction. If I have a grumpy person on the phone when I call my business partners, you know, I'd rather have someone willing to help than someone willing to, do as little as necessary to keep the job. And it is also sad, I find, on a human side, because this means that there's a huge amount of people who are spending anything between 6 and 10 hours a day doing something they profoundly dislike. I wouldn't want to do that. So I think these are just some data points that tell us that there is reason for looking for new ways of thinking about business and for looking at how and why we should innovate. Those are, I think, the main headlines. We can and we should need to think about ways to use markets more wisely. So that we maintain the great success story that we have created over the last decades, but at the same time we start mitigating more seriously the negative side effects that we don't want to see. What innovate? I've touched upon that already. I'm sure you all know these conceptions. So there's the B2B, the business to business. Markets where companies think they're in, and there's the B2C, the business to consumer parts. There's also B2G, so if you're selling your product services to government, you're in the B2G markets. And I would say that's all secondary, because one thing that all businesses share is that they're in the H to H market. And that ties very well into what you were saying, Bernd, on the foundations of the Global Ethic Institute. Business is not something that's anonymously where some algorithms execute automatically things that can be, if we're thinking about high-frequency trading on the financial side. But by and large, any business activity ultimately comes down to human interaction. So that's what we need to bear in mind for the mental framing that we need to adopt to innovate in a productive, in a meaningful way, to innovate in ways that makes the world a better place and that has a positive impact on the environment and or on people. And to make it a little more concrete, I said I brought one example, and I came across this recently, and I did a course on impact investing in St. Gallen last semester, and one of the student teams, they had to research an investment opportunity in a startup that does some meaningful work. And they found this example that I briefly want to talk you through. The situation is I want to send a parcel from Zurich to Vienna. Could be anywhere else within Europe. Now, what happens with this parcel if I hand it over to one of the three main actors? It's being picked up with a truck at my office address in Zurich, and then a plane flies it, depending on who I use, either to Paris, Liège, or Cologne. From Paris, Liège, and Cologne, it will be flown to Vienna, and in Vienna at the distribution center, it will be again picked up by a truck and delivered to the address. And now this guy who was working for one of these logistic companies was increasingly unhappy and said, this does not make sense. We're flying stuff around all over Europe. Why? It could be so much easier. And he founded a company called Imagine Cargo. And what Imagine Cargo does is if I call them and say I got a parcel to deliver from Zurich to Vienna, they send me a bike courier who picks it up at my address. The bike courier brings it to the train station, not to the airport, and a train will bring it to Vienna, and in Vienna, you can guess the rest of the story, a bike courier again comes and picks it up and delivers it to the address. Very simple, yet very impactful and powerful. They are doing it by using existing infrastructures and by using existing businesses and networking them together in a clever way. They are delivering packages in the same time that the traditional offers do for the same price, and they're achieving a 98% reduction in CO2 emissions with a very simple business model innovation. What Innovate was a very brief overview here. How are we doing on time? I need not a whole lot longer. So, which values are conducive to innovating? I've got two pairs and then one individual value that I think is especially relevant for delivering innovations and a culture in organizations that is conducive to delivering the type of innovations we want to see. And the first pairing is purpose and legitimacy. I think purpose is the core, and I find it scary sometimes how many people in leadership roles are having a hard time defining the purpose of their organization. Many times you hear what they do. So if you ask someone, I've had a client, or I have a client still in London, they're a technology SME, and when I asked them, so what's your purpose? I did cross-hierarchy interviews in the organization, and most people describe what they're doing in their daily jobs. So that, we're programming this, or we're helping, we've got a network security issue at a client, and we're making the network secure. And I said, no, I didn't ask you what you're doing. I asked you why you're doing it. What's the purpose of what you're doing? And ultimately, we concluded or arrived at a purpose statement then, which is around that they're enabling people to access information and have telephony options in a secure way on the go. And so that is really what they're delivering. If you think around, in Stuttgart, automotive city, the purpose of an automotive builder is not to build cars, but to enable individual mobility. So we need to think about the purpose first, because that anchors us and that allows us to reflect on what we're doing, if that actually is conducive to the purpose that we've set out to fulfill. And that leads us to the question of legitimacy. Because I can have a purpose and I can know my purpose and I can be very true to it, but it can be something that is destructive, that is value extracting rather than value generating. So I need to pair my purpose with gaining legitimacy in society for that purpose. And that is done through stakeholder engagement, basically. So I have the opportunity to talk to civil society actors, to look at the way I want to fulfill my purpose and the way I define my purpose in the first place, and see whether this is seen by civil society as something worthy of doing. And then I will gain public legitimacy. So I need a purpose as an organization, but I need to allow external people to reflect on that purpose together with me in order to gain legitimacy for what I'm doing. The second pairing is passion and integrity. If we're looking at innovation, innovation and passion is probably inseparable. People need to have their hearts and their minds and their hands joined together to deliver innovation. And passion may describe this. However, we need to be aware that passion is often seen like, something hairy-fairy, high in the clouds, and oh yes, I'm so passionate. And the reality is that true passion finds itself in the details of everything you do every day. That's what makes someone really passionate. If you're passionate about something, you will look at the last dot of what you're doing. You will pay attention to detail, and that's what expresses your passion, and not speaks about how passionate you are. So passion is very important, but we need to be sure that this passion is expressed in actually the detail of your everyday work, and not in big talks about we're all such a passionate group of people. Passion can make blind. So passion should be combined with integrity. And integrity, there's different research streams. That the simple and more relevant version or variant for the business context is probably the stream called behavioral integrity, which you can summarize nicely in one sentence: do what you say and say what you do. Now, if you're really passionate about something, but at the same time you are saying what you do and do what you say, you will have confrontations whether you're passionate for the right thing, because people will respond to your acting if you act with integrity. So passion is fantastic, but passion can make blind. You can become unaware of negative side effects that you generate because you're so passionate about your goal and you're too focused on that. So you need to combine that with behavioral integrity. And the last value that I think is core stands alone. I don't think it needs a pairing, and that's why it's on itself there, which is empathy. And again, empathy, if you talk to people, the first thing they tell you, oh yeah, this soft, fluffy thing, and you have to be nice to everyone, and that's not meant here. That can be a result of empathy, but it's not what we mean in general with empathy. If you look at the core of what empathy is about, it is about understanding the needs and desires of others and being able to respond to that. And this, of course, is a core factor of successful business in general. It was Henry Ford who, by all means wasn't known as a softie, who said if there's one single factor for a successful business, it is to understand the need of the others as well as your own needs, and make sure that you find compromises that allow to combine both. So empathy is not about being a nice guy. Empathy is about the capacity to think about what others' needs are and to respond to those in a productive manner. And that obviously will enhance your business and it will allow you to innovate. So, summing up, why innovate? I think we need to use markets more wisely. That is the bottom line of why we need innovation. And we're in a situation increasingly from the social as well as the environmental side that it's not a question of if we want to do that, but how and when we'll get going. And the faster we get going, the cheaper it'll be. That's as simple as that. Whether mankind's wisdom will be sufficient to get going soon or not, we'll have to see. But the bottom line is it's not a question if, it's a question when. And the price tag increases every day in social costs and financial costs and environmental costs. Secondly, what innovate? I think we need to approach it with the mindset that business success is measured along a triple bottom line and not a single bottom line, and that business essentially is human interaction. And sustaining business success in this context and the civil society pressures are just demonstrating that sustaining business success depends on a value proposition to society at large. And if we're looking what values are conducive to innovation, then we've got the two pairings of purpose and legitimacy, passion and integrity, and empathy. And I didn't check my time, but I think we're somewhat all right there. So I thank you very, very much for listening. And great pleasure. Thanks.